Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide our paper in half this way and then this way. So we have to measure and find out, well, how wide is the paper to start with. When you measure, put that line, let's see, that line, focus, that line right there on the edge of your paper, not the edge of your ruler on the edge of your paper. That's that first measurement spot that goes on the edge. So I put that line right on the edge of my paper. I come down here and it's basically 9 inches wide. What is half of 9, guys? Thank you. Okay, 4.5 is half of 9. So we come to 4.5. So here's 4. Here's halfway between 4 and 5. And we make a little mark at 4.5 at the top of our page. Then, this is really important. Just take your ruler and move it straight down and do the same thing at the bottom of your page. Don't take your ruler and turn it over. If you turn your ruler over, you're going to have a crooked line. So we're just going to go down to the bottom. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to line that up just like I did at the top. So it's at that line right there, not at the end of my ruler. And then measure 4.5.
Sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to remind you guys that there's no pet today. That's all. Have a great day.
Okay, then I'm going to turn my paper sideways and line up my 2 marks. I got one at the top, one at the bottom. And that's going to divide my paper in half vertically. And I'm just going to put a light line. I'm basically going to just use the weight of my pencil to come down and divide my paper. I don't really want to see it that much. It's just a guideline, super, super light. I'm not pressing at all. I'm just dragging my pencil over my paper because that will basically all be erased in the end. So I don't want like a dark line going right down the center of my face. Okay, we've got it divided in half vertically. If I get a little far ahead of you, make sure you let me know. Then we're going to divide it in half across this way. So now I'm going to turn my paper this way and measure how long my paper is from here to here. Again, lining that edge of my paper up with that first measurement line. And it is, and this doesn't have to be exact. The paper's supposed to be 12 inches long, but it's actually about 11 7/8. I'm not going to sit there and worry about that. I'm just going to say 6 inches, okay? So from this edge right here, measure to 6 inches, make a little mark, and then we're going to come over here and do the same thing on the other side. Now there's other drawings that we might do during the year where it has to be down to the last micrometer, but this is not that drawing. Again, I'm just going to drag my ruler over my paper, or not my ruler, my pencil over my paper, and just create that horizontal line across there so I have a crisscross. And now my paper's divided in half 2 ways. So the next part, is everybody this far? Does anybody need me to wait just a second before we do our next measurement? Okay, yeah, you two give me a thumbs up when you got it. Then we'll go to our next one. So I really don't want to get too far ahead while we're doing measurements. And I know it's really light on the screen, but we kind of have to keep it that way so it doesn't look really bizarre when we're finished. say if you're just struggling, you can't get something, just bring it back and I'll hurry and correct your line for you, and we'll be fine. All right, now my paper, just so we stay oriented, my paper is vertically in front of me right now. I'm going to turn it horizontally right now, and hopefully everybody does this right. So I've got it horizontally in front of me right now. And from this line, I'm going to measure to the left of this line. I'm going to come over 2.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 2.5 inch mark right on this line right here that I used to divide my paper in half. So halfway between the 2 and 3, the long line is 2.5. Then I'm going to come up here on that first little line of measurement, and I'm going to make a little mark right at the edge of my paper. Now I'm going to move it straight down. Put again on 2.5 inches. Right here's 2.5, that longer line. Come up here and make my little mark. And then I'll turn my paper back vertically, line up my 2 marks, and put a light line across. This line is pretty important because it's going to kind of determine everything on our drawing will be based off this line, and you'll understand why here in just a second. So I drew that one just slightly darker just so you can see it, even though it really goes against my grain to do that because I don't want to mess stuff up. Makes me nervous to do that, I guess I should say. One thing I forgot to do is grab myself a photocopy of the eye, so I'll just use my original, I guess. Hopefully it's dark enough. So there should be 3 lines on your paper, one that goes from the top to the bottom, and then 2 that go from left to right. Does everybody have that, or does anybody need a second? Okay, just give me a thumbs up when you got it. Okay. The good news is we won't need our ruler quite as much for the rest of the drawing, just a little bit, but for the most part we're going to use the eye for our measurement. Good? All right. Now if you look closely at your eye, there's a little dot here, a little dot here, a little dot here, and hopefully there's one somewhere right here that you can see right on the top. That one might be a little more vague. That little one right there. See those little dots on there? Those are little points of reference on that eye. Here's the general rule when drawing a face. The width of the eye is the distance between the 2 eyes, okay? The width of the nose is the distance from this corner to this corner, basically is the width of the nose. The width of the mouth is basically the distance from the center of the pupil, center of the pupil, the center of the pupil. That just gives you some ideas. The distance of the length of the nose is basically from the eye line down 1.5 eyes. Okay? So we're going to use our eye to get these measurements now. So the first thing we're going to do, and hopefully you can see it through your paper, this is going to be our eye line. Our top line is our eye line right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that eye line and that little center dot right there, it's right here, and there's one up here, that is halfway across that eye. And so what I'm going to do is put that underneath my paper, and I might have to hold it up to the light to see what I'm doing, and that is what I'm going to have to do in this case. I don't know really how to explain this otherwise, but right now, I don't know if you, yeah, you can kind of see my eye through it. So I've got it centered, okay? So this vertical line is lined up with the dot on the bottom and the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the corner and I'm just going to make a little mark right there. And then I'm going to come over to the other corner and make a little mark right there. And now I know that that distance from there to there is 1 eye width wide. Hopefully that makes sense. Does everybody follow what I'm doing? So from the center line right here, it's an equal distance from here to here and here to here, and it's 1 eye width wide. I just got a tiny, tiny, tiny little mark there so I know where the inside corner of my eyes need to go. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody on that. I tried to help you by putting those marks on the eye because it makes it a little easier to line things up when you hold it up. Just kind of hold it up to the light. Has everybody got those 2 marks? Anybody not have those 2 marks? Okay, so here's what we're going to do next. I'm going to put this back underneath, but this time, this little dot right here and this little dot right here, this one here and this one here, I want to have on my horizontal line right here. So I'm going to put this underneath, and the inside corner of that eye, I'm going to line it up. I'll show you what it's going to look like here in just a second. Okay, now when I hold this up to my paper, you can see the inside corner lines up with that dot, and my eye is actually lining up. This line right here is lining up with my 2 little marks halfway up the iris, okay? So it's important that they're lined up with that both those little dots on the iris are right on the eye line, not above or below it, but right on it, okay? And that's right here, it's perfectly aligned right now. I guess that shows it just a little bit better. And then I'm just going to lightly trace that on my paper. This is just to kind of get so I have the same size eye on both sides. I'm going to just lightly do it so in case I need to erase anything. And I am also going to trace lightly the iris and the pupil. Now, if it's driving you nuts and you just can't see it, get your Chromebook out. Go to a blank page, a white page on your Chromebook, and just use it as a tracing table, okay? Just set your paper on it. It will show up bright as day. Those lines will show up through your paper super bright. So use the resources that you have if you need them. Yeah, I could have everybody go over to the tracing table over there on the side of the room. That would take all day because we're all standing in line waiting to use it. But why do that if you have a Chromebook? It'll work just fine. Try to make sure, though, that when you're done, that your iris and your pupil are round and not have any flat lines or straight lines or any corners. Because there are no corners on a circle, and there are no straight lines on a circle. So I got that one drawn, and I got it where I want it, so now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to slightly darken the line now that I know where I want it. Not going to go super dark. But if you've done it correctly, both corners of your eye, the left and right, will both be slightly underneath the eye line. If your corner is above or on the eye line, then you did not line it up with these 2 dots. Okay. That'll be pretty easy for me to tell just at a glance. All right, so when I'm finished, I have that exact eye on there. So this should look pretty much just like that. Now the next part, you almost maybe you will have to have your Chromebook out because I don't know how well it's going to show through on your table. I know it shows through on mine fine, but I don't know how it's going to look on your individual desks here. Does anybody need more time to finish this eye right here? Raise your hand if you need more time before we do the other eye. Okay, I don't see any hands, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this eye on our photocopy and just flip it over, okay? And it might be hard to see. To make it easier to see, flip it over right on your paper, on your white paper, and you can see it easier. I'm just going to come along here, lightly trace this on here so I know where it's at. I'm just tracing this on the back. The reason I'm doing this is so I can see it when I go to try to trace this other eye. I've got it on there. I'm just going to make it darker, and this way it will show through my drawing paper. I realize it's a little bit tedious to have to redraw it, but I'm just trying to make it easier so you're not all getting too fussed up over trying to get two circles and make everything look just alike. It'll come through pretty close. The last thing I need to make sure is that I have those little dots. I might have to hold it up to the light somewhere, but I got to make sure I got my little dots on there so that I can see them through it, because that's how I line it up on the paper. So if I got to make it darker on the original side, like that, see it when I hold it up to the light. So now I have that little mark right here, and that little mark right there, and that tells me where I need to line it up on my eye line. So when I put it underneath my paper now and I have the eye flipped over, I know that the corner, I'll hold this up here while I line this up, I know that the corner has to line up with that dot, and the other two little dots on the iris have to line up with my center line coming across here, my eye line. Okay. Right now, looks like I've got everything about where it should go. Just double checking. And my hand moves, so now I got to reline it up. Okay, right there is perfect. It's all lined up just like I need it. I'll set it down, lightly trace it on, then go back all over all of it once I feel like I have it in the right place and don't need to move anything. got it lightly drawn on now, and I'm just gonna kind of check it as I go. Now I need a little space underneath my iris. Draw my iris on there. And it may not be identical to the one on the right, but it's going to be pretty darn close. It'll be a lot more close than if we just tried to freehand both of them. Basically just tracing what we started, what we created in the first place with the right eye. Now we have our eyes perfectly placed on the paper. I hope this is kind of making sense. And then we're going to figure out our nose length and mouth length here in just a second. If you have your Chromebook out, it's way easier if you just set it on your Chromebook so you got a light underneath it. But if you don't, if you want to do it the harder way, I don't care. Just looking through your paper and hoping it shows up. That's fine too. I don't really care which way you do it. So does everybody have two eyes? Does anybody need a second to finish two eyes? All right, let's get our nose length on there. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to put our eye on there, and then we're going to measure one length and then a half a length. And so the first thing I'm going to do is that top corner of the eye. I'll get this on here and then hold it up so you can see it. When I get up there, I got that corner right on the eye line right there, and that gives me a full length right there, okay? So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to make a mark, a little tiny mark. I'll get this relined up, moved on me. Come on. Okay, I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to make a little mark that's one eye length long. Okay, and then I'm going to move that eye down and line that corner up again with that little mark that I made. See what I've done here? I'm lining up that little corner with the little mark that I made. I have to hold it up to the light so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so when I hold that up now, you can see that little corner is lined up with that little dot that I made. And then I'm going to come halfway down my eye. I've got those little marks that mark halfway. And then I'm just going to make another little mark halfway down my eye. And now I know that that is where my nose line is going to be, right there. And it can vary. It can go to here. You could use that halfway mark if you wanted, because we're only talking about, a little over 1/8 of an inch from here to here. If you want it to be on this dividing line in the center, that's fine. If you want to use that little line up there to make it technically 1.5 eyes wide, either one's going to work. We're going to be fine, okay? Nobody's going to worry about 1/8 of an inch difference on an eye. Yep, you're fine. What's going on? Yep, so take this and you just put it underneath there. Like, hold that up to the light. See, I got the corner. I don't know if you can see that, but right. Oh, gotta get it to show up somehow for you. Anyway, it's right there. Here's the bottom. Yeah, I can see it right there at the bottom. So you have that at the perfect spot. Then you just move this up to that corner again. where you had it, right there at the corner, and then halfway. And in your case, it's right on that line. So you're good. Okay. Double check yours. Yep, you did it on the one. That's why I said you gotta do it on the top. The whole drawing's not gonna work. I don't know what to tell you. What you can do is redo your measurements and then just set your paper over this and just on your new one. Make sure you do it on the top line and just trace over your eyes. But at least you got them placed and you don't have to redo the measurements on that. So that's good. All right. Now for the width of our nose. We're going to measure from the corner of this eye right here. So I'm putting this first line right here on the corner of my eye, and then I'm coming over to the edge of my paper, and I'm seeing where the edge of my paper is. And in this case, it's right here. Okay, I'm going to just draw right on the ruler. I don't care if I make a mark on the ruler, because technically it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 3 5/8, and it's going to vary a little bit by your paper and stuff. I'm just making a mark on it so I don't have to memorize it. And then I'm just going to move that straight down, keeping this measurement right here in the same place on the edge of my paper. And then all I have to do is come over here and make a little mark right here by my nose line. And now I know how wide my nose is from here to here, because that's halfway. Okay, because it's the inside corner that determines the width of the nose, which is actually 7/8. And rather than sit here and, well, I have to do the same thing on the other side if I want this to be accurate. I measure it, and it's the same exact mark from here to here, so I've got it all even. Then all I got to do is come down here, put it on my nose line. I hope this is making sense to you. Put it on my nose line, right there where I've already drawn it on here. This edge is on the edge of the paper. This is right where I made my mark before. Now I know that that's how wide my nose needs to be. And I can come up here to the top, back to my eye line. Actually, I can come below my eye line. It doesn't really matter where I go. I'm just going to create a vertical line. I'm going to make a slight little mark right here. Come over here, move it over, make a slight little mark. And this is so I can create two vertical lines that are in the exact same width apart. Okay, I've got a little mark, and I'm just going to put a light line between these two lines so I know where the width of my nose is going to be. And I'm not going to draw it all the way up because I don't need to, because it's not how wide the nose is at the top, it's just how wide the nose is at the bottom. So all that does, when I'm done, is tell me how wide my nose is going to be, which lines up with that corner. So the corner of the eye to that line, corner of the eye to that mark, that's straight up and down. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. And basically, your nose width is basically the width of an eye. So if I took my eye and stick it under my paper, I put it between those two lines, I don't know if that's going to show up, but it kind of shows up. Voila, it's the width of that eye right there. And I still haven't decided whether I'm going to make the bottom of my nose this line or this line. I can decide that later. It's not important right at the moment. Is there anybody that needs more time to get to this point of completion? Okay, just give me a thumbs up when you're there. Next thing we're going to do is determine where our mouth is going to go. All right, so the mouth is pretty easy to determine. So what we're going to do is we're just going to come over to the edge of our paper. This will make this a lot easier. And turn that over where I got my marks. Okay, I'm going to line my mark up, that little mark right here on the eye right here. I'm going to line my paper up with that little mark right there. And I'm going to make this the bottom of my nose. So I'm going to erase that as my bottom of my nose. I'm going to just use this line just for convenience sake. Because like I say, we're only talking about a little over an eighth. So I've got this dot lined up with the bottom of my nose. I'm going to move it over just a little bit so I can see where the corner of my eye is. And I'm just going to put a mark right there. Actually, I did that wrong. It's got to be this, excuse me. It's about 3/4 of that. So I'm going to line it up with the bottom edge of my iris right here. So this corner is lined up right here, bottom edge of my iris, make a mark. Then I'm going to come over to this side and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the corner right here, bottom edge of my iris right there. And I'll just line those two up. I'll just make a light line going across here. I'm not going to draw it all the way across because I only need a little bit of a line because I don't need a mouth that wide. I just need a line there. And we are going to figure out where the center of the iris is and come down, and that will be the edge of our mouth when we're done here in just a second. Did I lose anybody on that? Sorry, because I made that first measurement wrong and then the second one was correct. So it's about 3/4 of the length of the mouth between the bottom of the nose. And where we're going to put this mouth. Grant, would you go up there and tap that screen, please? Yeah, thank you. All right, let's get the width of our mouth. I'm just going to measure from the very center line right here over to approximately the center of the pupil. Which, by the way, technically would be about where the little mark was before. So it's about 1 inch on mine from here to the center. Roughly is 1 3/4 inches. So I'm going to just come down here and measure over 1 3/4 inches from the center. So 1 3/4 inches right here, make a little mark. And then I'll put the 3/4 mark over here. Measure to the end. Okay, so it's 1 3/4 inches. So the distance from here to here, once I have it on there, is going to be basically 3.5 inches from mark to mark. That's how wide my mouth is going to be. Okay. So half of 3.5 is 1 3/4 inches. So it's 1 3/4 inches from the center vertical line on each side. Hopefully that made some sense. That'll be our little corner of our mouth right here, right here. shorten that line up because I don't need it.
Just fixed it, measurements for the mouth.
Okay, the nose is 1, from right here, 1.5 eyes. So just use this line because that's basically about where it is. And then just come down 3/4, so you measure from the corner to the edge of the iris. So you're turning this way when you put it under there. So the distance from here to here will be the distance from here to here, okay? To get that. It looks like you have it, and then for your width, it's straight down from the pupil, and basically it's 1 3/4 here, 1 3/4 there. So I think you're pretty close. Let me measure, double check. So we gotta come down. How far was it from there? So it's 1 inch. What it is. So I'll just take this and put it down here so I can see it. That tells you how far down that line's gotta go, okay? I can come over here and just put it right here. Basically see it right there. Line those two up. That's pretty darn straight. Then we just put our mouth across there like that. And then measure over 1 3/4, 1 3/4, make a mark, and that'll give you the width. Okay? We're just about ready to create our nose. I'm gonna look at something real quick here. Okay, our nose is basically gonna be comprised of a circle in the center that we're gonna trim away, and then the 2 nostril flares on each side. To create that circle, rather than trying to freehand a circle right in here, we'll just use the circle of our iris, basically, to create it. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna put the eye underneath our paper. I'm just gonna center it. You can see it right there. Just gonna center it right on that line, right in the middle. So the bottom edge of the iris is sitting on my nose line right here. And I'm just gonna lightly trace around it. Now, of course, it's going to stop at the upper eyelid right there, and that's all right because I don't need a full circle to draw this. I just need the bottom part of this circle. So this part of the circle is all I need, and I don't want it too dark because we're going to erase a lot of it here in a minute. I just need to have it centered is the main thing. Okay? Hopefully that made some sense. That way we got kind of an equal distance, on either side of it, and it's kind of right in the middle, and life's hopefully good. trying to solve some problems from years past where people get that too small or too big. Now we're kind of all hopefully roughly the same size on that. Okay, I'm going to zoom this in because this next part is not particularly tricky. It's just that we kind of want everybody to do it the same. I'm going to create the nostril hole. And to do that, here's my center line right here. I'll darken a little bit so you can see it. I'm going to come just to the right of my center hole. Okay? I don't want it on the line. I'm going to come just to the right of it. And I'm going to bring a line that curves up and then curves out horizontally. Okay, it curves out horizontally, and then I'm going to hook it back around, just like that. So it makes a little J hook on the end. So that's one side. Comes down below my nose line, just a little ways, curves up this way. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing, about the same width from the center. And draw it lightly at first so I can make sure I got the shape about right. I'm going to come out just a little further, I can see. The important thing is when you get up here and you start to curve right here, that it's horizontal across here and not angled up this way or this way. This line, if I set my pencil right on that line, or set my ruler on it, you'll see that it goes kind of straight across from each other, okay, because it's horizontal across the top of that bend. Then it hooks around underneath it. Make sure it's not at an angle at the top of that bend, or you're going to have some issues later on. And make sure it does not touch the center line down there either. So once I have that, I'm going to erase inside of it. I'm getting rid of some of my stuff that I have on it. I'm just going to clean it up so that when I'm done, it's no longer just a circle. It looks like kind of a ball that is supported by these two things that arc and curve around. Okay? I hate the angle that it's doing on that, but that's how it should look. And hopefully we didn't lose anybody too bad on that. Just kind of getting things blocked in before we do all our shading and all our detail work. It's just foundation work at this point. Does anybody need more time at this point to get to this point of completion? All right, let's go ahead and finish our base of this nose. Then we're going to bring a line that comes around and angles back towards the center. I'm going to put some space between the end of my line right here and start my next line about where the nose line starts. I'm going to bring it around. I'm going to come close to my line over here, but not quite. Start bringing it back up and lean towards the center. I don't want to draw this too dark because I mostly want to shade this later. Bringing it right down there by my, so we're just kind of coming around the nostril opening, bend it around and angle it about the same angle on both sides. So we're trying to create a mirror image right here on either side. Once we have that done, we pretty much have our foundation for the nose finished, and we'll come back and shade things later and it will look more two-dimensional. What it will look like when we're done is more like this, okay? We're just trying to set it up so that we have some guidelines for when we shade it in. I don't want it to go quite clear out to the edge of the lines. This is a female face that we're drawing, so therefore the nose is going to be slightly smaller. If this was a male nose, the outer side of that nostril flare would go here to here. And this part where the nostril opening is would be a little bit bigger. But generally, not always, but generally female noses are slightly smaller than male noses. Does anybody need more time on the nose before we go to the mouth? Okay, I'll give you a second. Just, guys, give me a thumbs up when you're ready, and then we'll go to the mouth. And just for the record, faces are not super easy to draw. This is just an easier way of drawing a face. I'm just trying to show you an easier way and just trying to randomly throw it on your paper and hope that everything lands where it's supposed to. Okay, when we draw the mouth, everybody knows kind of how to draw these little birds that fly in the air, right? Everybody's familiar with that shape. We're just going to slightly change it by putting a curve on each end. So when we draw it, it's going to look more like this. Same like the bird, it just curves up at the end. That's all we're doing. That's the only difference right there. So we're going to put a slight curve up. And to do this, we're going to start right where that little corner is. We're going, well, that little mark is, not a corner. Where the little mark is on this side, I'm going to bring it slightly down below that mark, bring it slightly above my center line, and then curve it down when I get to the center. Okay? I'm not getting way above it. If I get way above this line, she's going to have a big old fat upper lip. Okay? And I'm going to come over to the other side and do the same thing. Curve down slightly. And I'm going to draw it light so I get kind of where I want it, about the same height up. I'm going along there really light to start with to make sure that it looks like it's about right. And I'm going to come in here and then I'll darken it. That is the upper line of the upper lip. That's the top line of it. This is not the separation line between the upper and lower lip. This is the top edge of the upper lip. Okay, to get the bottom edge of the upper lip, I'm going to make a little mark a little bit below my center line where the lip line is, just a little mark right here, just so I know where the middle is, where I want to end. Then I'm going to follow this, and I'm going to come back down to it here. So I'm going to come along from this corner. I'm going to draw a light line. I'm going to go back up a little bit and then come down right in the middle. I'm going to go up, come back down. Try to keep these about the same on both sides. Getting a little fatter on this one, so I'm going to skinny it up. Do it lightly first. So I got that about where I want it. Now I'll come in here. I'll slightly darken this line and blend it right into my corner. Do the same thing on this side. Now I have the upper lip drawn. Basically, it's kind of almost a image like the one above. It's just the wings are spread out further if that's a bird. So if you visualize what an eagle looks like when he's soaring in the air, he has his wings out a little bit further. They tip up right at the end because the wind going underneath them. Kind of that silhouette. Hopefully that kind of makes sense in your head what I'm talking about. Does everybody have the upper lip finished? Does anybody need more time on the upper lip? Okay. The important thing when we draw the lower lip is that it is thicker and wider. Wider as in from top to bottom, not from side to side, but thicker and fuller than the upper lip. Okay. About the only time your upper lip is going to be bigger than your bottom lip is if you live in Hollywood and they shoot it full of your butt fat, which is actually what they use to do those lip jobs, which is kind of gross if you think about it. But they suck fat out of your butt and inject it into your lip, and then you get those, I call them butt lips. That's what they look like. So we're going to come down below. I see how wide my lip is here. I want this to be a little wider. I'm just going to guess. I know that I want it to be wider, so I'm making sure that it's a little bit wider than the lip above. Okay, and then I'm going to come in a little ways, and I'm going to make a little mark, a little diagonal mark going this way. Come in about the same width over here and make a little diagonal mark going that way. Okay. It's just a reference right at the moment. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along here and I'm going to try to bring this all together. So I'm going to make kind of a curved line that goes along here, curves up, curves up, curves up, goes to that diagonal line that I made. Comes off just a little flatter across the bottom. Flatten out just a little bit going across the bottom, but still kind of want it more or less curved. And now I have my upper and lower lip on there. And it should be thicker and fuller than the upper lip. It should not be the same size. Dot right there, I want to go away. We all have mouth on there. Okay, let's put the upper eyelids on our eyes now. We're going to come up here above our eyelid, follow the arc around, and then bring it closer as we come down to the right corner. So we'll start up here above the eye. I'm going to make it a light line. Peak about right there. Turning my paper as I go, and then gradually getting closer and closer and closer until I reach the eye line down here, and then I'll stop. Okay, so the distance between here and here is more narrow than the distance between here and here. That's on purpose. That's how it should look. So whatever I do on one side, of course, I want to move over and do the same thing on the other side. I'm gonna come over here, start near that line. Make sure I'm going to end closer. I'm just going to bring that together. And now our face looks a lot like some of you girls and my wife and everybody else in the morning before any makeup or anything else is done. Like, do you have eyelashes and how come your lips look funny? Okay, so that is about as plain as a face gets right there. Our two lines that we had for our edge of our nose right here, I want to erase those off. Hopefully you didn't draw them too dark so you don't have to press too hard when you erase. The lighter you can press with your eraser and get the line to go away, the better. Because when you erase, that eraser is an abrasive and it'll scratch up the paper. But if you don't press very hard, then it's easier to do your shading later on. It won't affect your shading. So we're going to erase out the line inside the lip. Pretty much, for all our intents and purposes, we don't need the lip line anymore. We got our mouth on there. We got our nose on there. So we can come in here, erase that out now. Just do a little house cleaning here. Leave the center line. It's going down the middle of your paper. Let's get rid of these horizontal lines now because we don't need them. Just going to clean things up. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. Now that we got that eyelid on there, we don't need to worry about the eye line anymore. I'm not going to worry about erasing it out of the pupil because that's going to be black. So it'll cancel it out on its own. Technically, I don't really need to worry about it in the iris either because you're going to put those lines going around the iris like a wagon wheel. And it will just blend in with those. Just cleaning things up a little bit. So now on my paper, I don't have all those guidelines except for the center line. And it's cleaned up pretty good. The only thing we got left now is to create the bridge between the nose, or between the eyes for the nose, and where the eyebrows are going to go. Does anybody need a minute to get to this point of completion, everything cleaned up? Okay, just give me a thumbs up and then I'll know when to move on. Now, in theory, we could make a measurement for where the top of the eyebrow goes, but in this case, we're just going to freehand it and try our best on this. Instead of making like a line going across here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a line that kind of parallels like we did before when we drew our eyes individually. We're going to just come above our eye. Down here, it's going to be a little closer, and it comes up above the eye. Starts to angle down, just like that, just a light line. You can do the same thing on the other side. If you want to, you can bring a line across here just to make sure they're the same height. That makes you feel better, just so you don't get one way higher than the other. Bring it down so it gets a little closer to the eye on the outside corner. We're just putting a light eyebrow on there for now, just so we know where it's at. Okay, and you want them to basically be the same distance from here to here, here to here. Don't really want one way up here and one way down here. It's not going to be looking at us really skeptically. Now here's where it's going to get a little bit tricky. Has everybody got those eyebrows on there before I do the little bit tricky part? This part needs to be done super, super light. We're going to just kind of follow that angle that's coming down here, and then we're going to make it go down a little bit and intersect with our eye line. We're going to do the same thing on this side. The goal here is to have it about the same distance from center. Like from here to here and here to here to be about the same distance. What that is it's kind of where the bridge of the nose is, right between the eyes. And then I'm going to just put a light line that comes off the top of my nostril flare. I'm just going to kind of bring it up and come very light up here too. Because one side's going to be in light, one side's going to be in shadow. So I don't want a dark line here. I don't want a line going all the way around my nose. Oh, that's right, we're on the assembly schedule. I forgot. Sorry about that. That's my bad. That's as far as we're going to go today. Double check, make sure your name's on the back end.